So, like I said, in my opinion, I feel like I've been noticing that American society has like shown zero respect for black men as men, as it relates to any other nationality of men. And I started noticing a lot just through forms of media and just personal interactions with people, where I would see all the time like black men kind of cowering in the presence of European men, women, or children, or watching their speech. And these is like grown men, and it's like a modern day. And I still notice little things where, like, black men feel like they can't really talk a certain way in public. And it's kind of weird because I don't really notice it in any other type of men. Even when you go to other um, let's say other ethnicities or other minority groups, they still have a different tone of freedom where they feel like they can say things as a man, and they don't really worry about the repercussions or consequences as much as black men. So that kind of triggered me to say, what's going on with the African American man, the black male, and what can he do, or what are we doing to better our image in a sense of like gain our respect back, because to me it's completely lost. And we kind of just I notice we kind of dwell in it, where we just kind of like, hey, people don't respect us, and that's just the way it is. We got to be safe and cautious out here as black men in America. But in my opinion, I feel like that's getting to a point where it's no longer acceptable. I know for myself personally, I think more and more about how unacceptable that is to really try to teach a principle to a young man about how to be a man, but yet they're going to see me do certain things that don't correlate with what I'm teaching them or mentoring young black males to grow up to be like. Um, so yeah, so I just wanted to kind of have a conversation about, like, what do you think the images and stereotypes and expectations of black men are in America, and how does that affect you personally?
Yeah, man. This is Fire responding. A man Kanan Powers. It's a good topic. It's a good subject, man. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those that you're going to have to put different parts to, because it's open ended, but that has the advantage of being able to just sort of speak freely. It's a broad topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think to start off, fundamentally, I would say I think some of the distinctions that you just spoke about, where you see other individuals from different races, ethnicities, and groups able to speak more freely. Um, I think the fact that you see that on the outside, or you see that behavior exhibited, is it's an indication of what's on the inside, right? So when a person is going to be free, person is first free in and of himself. And then what you will see expressed is what that person is more on the inside. And I think what that means to me is we we as black men in this, especially in this country, have been raised we've been raised in sort of an arrested development. So the fact that you go out and you're told to not speak with so much bass if you want to make it in certain spaces, to lower your voice, to be humble, to work two, three times as hard and expect only what the others get for working, only one time as hard. And all these step here, don't step there, walk softly here, because these are all sort of things that could determine our success or failure in the world. Um, I think that that's an indicator of us being raised in an arrested sort of mentality, to where we're not truly free on the inside, right? Whereas other races of men who have not been raised with sort of those mental barriers and constant checks and balances, they they're more free, and so they express themselves accordingly. And I think one of the things that we as black men in this country we face a legacy of internal checks and balances. Some of those things historically were necessary for our survival and well-being. We had to learn to not be too ambitious about starting businesses, about speaking our mind in public, about taking the time to talk and gather together and socialize, because these things at one point were strictly against the law. Now they're against the law, sort of ad hoc. The police will come and break up a group, or white folks will come around and start to feel uncomfortable if you're speaking together, especially too intelligently. So all these things that cause us to retreat within ourselves, they wind up making us smaller men inside. Like we're not fully developed, so we speak like that. I mean, we're constantly checking ourselves. So the first step, I mean, to me, I mean, if the goal is not to be like Mexicans or white men or Asian men, whatever. They are the form of expression of themselves, given their own realities of freedom. I think us as black men, once we get to know ourselves and who we are intimately as individuals, and then we realize the hopes and dreams that we have, and we want to be free, and we challenge ourselves to think freely, that will start to show up on the outside. And though I think there will be consequences to it, right? We'll get pushback, we'll get resistance from society at large. And I dare say, too often our own black women, whether well intentioned or just reflexive, people aren't used to us being free. They're used to us being checked. And we talk like we're checked. We behave like we're checked. We think like we're checked. And anything outside of that can often get interpreted as toxic nowadays, or dangerous, or uppity, arrogant sort of things. But in spite of all that, I think we have to challenge ourselves to keep making a run for freedom.
Yeah, no, that makes, yep, I agree. And that's kind of why I wanted to have a discussion, because I feel like it's just not even enough discussion around the the situation. And it's like, as a man, eventually, you have to take responsibility for your own actions. That's just one thing that I believe, whether right or wrong. And then as you as you become better at that, and you learn that you're not always going to make the right decision, and you can you know let's say in a positive way, you can criticize yourself so that you could do better. I think that you make more and more decisions, and you're not so worried about whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision. And I think a lot of times, because the black male is under so much scrutiny, that a lot of times we overthink our decision making processes in our position and our role, even in the fight for justice or freedom itself. Because
Right,
like, if a man can't protect his family, it's only so much he really might feel like he can do. So he's like, he kind of stepped back in this fight for justice. You don't see a group of black men storming the state capitol because they say, what, we'll get shot and that it is. We think these through, and we think them through to the point where it's like we're not even active, because once we think it through, the end result for us is usually something fatal. It's not like we never really get a smack on the wrist. So if we want to do things like the Black Panthers or Nation of Islams, where you see these people who pretty much had their stuff together and how they got destroyed, that can be very discouraging for a black male to think like, okay, well, how am I going to do better than that? And you just kind of become passive, even though it goes against your nature of how you feel and what you think. You basically repress that down to the smallest form, to the simplest form, where you're just not reactive, because you can't really do what you really want to do. And I think that it's a time where we have to see how that's destroying us on the inside, and it's not helping our situation as a whole. When we continue to see these fights for equality or injustice against injustice, and usually it revolves around the black man. So you'll have like George Floyd as a recent example, where it's like all these people come out to support this cause, whether they're doing it with ill intent or not. The point is they come out, they support this cause, they act like they support it, and you really just don't see black men at the forefront of those movements, even though we might be the primary victims. So it's people that fight for um, policies to remove mass incarceration, but you don't really see black men at the forefront. So it's like, why can we be the victims of so many things, but then we don't have a lot of black men fighting for those things? Like we're not defending ourselves um, against the very things that we know are attacking us and are affecting us directly. And I just think that that's quite odd in a society where people claim that these things don't really even exist. Like people will tell us in a heartbeat that racism ain't as bad as it used to be. And it's like, well, the reactions of black men is saying otherwise, because it's obviously equally as bad, because otherwise there will be no fear um about speaking up against injustice, because you can do it the politically correct way and get a politically correct response. But we know that that's not true.
True, man. And it's like it sort of brings a couple of things to mind. It's like we have to look at the overall reality of our situation. And our situation, no matter who we are in this society and world, in this case, we're talking about black men in the northern United States, black men who were born and raised here, ADOS to some people, American descendants of slavery, or foundational black American. Think of another camp. Uh, I
Hmm.
think that we have to look at the overall picture of how we are here. And the problem with especially these current generations, these recent generations, is we tend to compartmentalize our realities. We think of things in terms of since the day we was born, or maybe what our parents have told us. And even once we get information about what our parents or grandparents might have told us, we sort of put that sort of on the back shelf, like that's just some stuff back there up in the attic that, has no relevance to where we're at in the room and in the spaces we occupy. But in reality, who we are is not just who we are in our lifetimes, it's who we are historically. It's like a marathon. If the person that came before me was only able to achieve a certain distance, that means when I grab that baton and I'm gonna run the length that I'm gonna run, I'm gonna start out in a certain place. It could be everybody else's way down the track. It could be they've lapped me a couple times, and here I'm trying to run and compete, man. And I don't know if I start a marathon race, a relay race, and I'm 3, 4, 5 laps behind, and everybody else is just, strolling past, and I got extra weight strapped to me. You know what I mean? My my sort of desire, my confidence, my esteem, all of these factors that's going to contribute to my competitiveness and my nature is going to be affected by that. And I think that we refuse I say we don't, I won't say we refuse to study history. I'll say we as Black Americans, we don't study history enough. The same way they kept books and history from us before, I think by virtue of those same mental shackles and distractions, I don't think we look at the big picture enough. And there is a reason why us as Black men, we have sort of the mental psychological weights that we have. I mean, they're trained in us from our earliest moments, and they're given to us, not sort of in an ambiguous way, like, yeah, this is what we inherited from our fathers in some sort of ambiguous theory. No, we point to real memories, like when we're little. When we're little, like our parents covered us more closely. stay over here. Don't talk to them. Who you looking at? Don't look over there. All this sort of restrictive behavior. That is something that's real that's given to us. Hey, you got to work twice as hard if you want to make it. Hey, if you get stopped by the cops, don't look at, don't say nothing. You sit there, you just answer like this, you know. These are very real behaviors that are taught. They're concrete things, right? They're not just some sort of spirit we have to prove that we have gotten from our forefathers. No, you can track many of these indicators. And what happens is we grow up within those harnesses and within those boundaries, and we impose them because we internalize and we learn them, and then they become part of who we are as a method of living and surviving. And so they're there. And then when we find ourselves in situations, we tend to think, okay, if I do speak out, it's kamikaze time, right? Because I'm supposed to deal with this in a very passive way. I'm supposed to study these people and not offend them and know how they work and turn it into a joke and escape over here and all these tactics we have to live and defend ourselves as Black men. Well, we know that when we say, that's enough, I ain't taking no more, I'm making a stand. In our mind, that equals kamikaze. That equals it's the end. This is it. It's going down, all or nothing. That's why we're so reluctant to sort of go there and make a stand. Whereas other groups, since they're not raised with that mentality, and oftentimes the reality doesn't impose such severe consequences on them, right? They're able to sort of make those stands and everything.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, and again, that's why I think it's time to have these conversations because I'm starting to feel more and more like we have to unify in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just a small group of like-minded people, and not necessarily to form some kind of organization or group where we trying to protest against the American government or anything, even if it's just to talk and repair damages within ourselves. I think it's important that Black men start taking that serious, being that we usually are the target for a lot of other people's animosities, hatreds, and rage. And you could look at it a lot of different ways. Like some people can just say, "Hey, somewhere down the line, Black males have screwed something up, and regardless of why, how long are they going to use the reasons why as an excuse or a reason to justify their current actions or lack thereof?" So when we do talk about um, Black males' aggression towards each other, where a Black male might be very eager to physically assault or attack another Black male, but they won't be so eager to do that with a group outside of the Black males. We can psychologically say, oh, these are the reasons why. But do we really have solutions or even expectations within ourselves to say, hey, we're not going to do this no more, just because we know that's not the way either? Like, when do we kind of convert our ways of thinking and put those thoughts together, sort of like these type of projects that me and you are doing, where we say, hey, we have to try to attempt something new, because to continue to repress it is just not fair. It's not fair to the people who are fighting for us genuinely, and it's not fair to ourselves to just kind of take that passive role, knowing that we have so much more potential, but just are unable to overcome those fear factors and barriers. So I was just going to think about some of the some of the mentalities that I come across from Black males, and I'll just kind of say what I think and what I've noticed about them, and how at the end of the day it's kind of the same end result regardless to what type of Black male that I encounter. So like, if I countered the Black military man, who justifies fighting for his oppressor and does so, with pride, like They proud about being in the military. I'm a black military man, and I fought hand in hand with the fellow man or whoever. At the same time, you fighting for a country that you know the history of and you know have oppressed you, but you do that with pride. And in addition to that, I don't see a lot of black military men coming to the black communities, doing summer boot camps with young men to teach them the benefits of even, not necessarily joining the military, but implementing those principles of discipline. It's like, okay, you can be a black military male, but why aren't you even giving that back to the black community to say, hey, I'm going to give these young men something that I've learned from the military, not necessarily a secret or something that you can't teach, but just basic principles. You don't see the Army National Guard coming to the black community, or black men that have served come to the black community to give something positive. They'll just kind of say, hey, they served and they proud of serving, but they don't do anything when it comes to fighting against oppression. And then you have like, um you have the black male convict who may have been arrested and feel like he don't have nothing to contribute to society because he's constantly begging for forgiveness from everybody for whatever he was convicted of, whether right or wrong, whether even if it's unjustified. You'll see a man who has a criminal history and it takes away from him, where he feel like, hey, I can't say certain things, I can't get certain jobs, and they just kind of take a passive role where they kind of just accept where they are in life. And then you have the alternative, the good guy who always followed the rules and never been arrested, and he does so with the idea that all the other black men just need to get their minds right. But at the same time, that type of mentality, like, there's no group that comes back to the black community and give as a group to say, hey, this is how you survive as black men in America. They usually marry off to some other group and kind of leave the black community behind. And these are just different type of males, like I said, that I've encountered. And then you got the wise black man who basically says, everybody else kind of stupid and blind because they don't know what he know. But there's no collective effort or assertive effort from multiple wise black men that constantly go to their communities to try to help or empower their people. But more so, it seems like, criticism or condemning to say, hey, you don't know what I know, and you need to read more, brother this, brother that. And it's like, okay, you reach out to them, and at the end of the day, they're not really doing anything to make a bigger impact. And then you have the kumbaya type of black man who just don't see color and everything is all good in his mind, where he's not acknowledging the traumas and things that happen to black men because maybe they have just chosen to ignore it, or they have moved on because they might have got a little piece of the American pie or whatever. And I can go on about just different types of black men I encounter, but I've noticed that at the end of the day, there's no collectiveness amongst any of those particular groups of people, even with their peers. So if we can say we're all kind of different types of black men, that may be true, but even those different types of black men don't seem to have a sense of togetherness that is solidly black, if that makes sense. And I think that that's becoming just basically something that I've noticed. And I can't say that it kind of bothers me to an extent, because I'm like, it's not making sense to me in my head, where I'm like, okay, I know why, but it has to be, at some point we have to acknowledge that we are not doing as much as we can do and as much as we should be doing in this fight towards injustice and inequality and whatnot.
Facts, man. Facts. Well said. While you were talking, and I'll just sort of, I'll sort of shadow what you're saying this time. I think that well, one thing you said earlier, what it brought to mind was when we diagnose, when we talk about the reasons and the forces that act upon us, that sort of cause our condition. One thing I notice is we black men are the only of the only essentially the only segment of society that is not allowed to talk about hostile forces that act upon us. And what do I mean? When we say these are the forces that are acting upon us, often what we get is, okay, okay, well, when you gonna stop with the excuses? Yeah, the white man, yeah, the white man. At some point, it's not the white man. At some point, it's you. Now, I understand the 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 necessity, the need for self accountability. That's very real. However, no other group is told to exclusively focus on self accountability without noting, without seeing, without calling out the hostility that they face on, especially if it's on an ongoing basis. Case in point, Eurocentric Jewish people, right? And no shade against them, but they're allowed to talk about, right, what happened in Germany, right? They're allowed to talk
Mhm.
about people throwing rocks and bottles and Molotov cocktails, or whatever they feel is a threat to them, right? And they're allowed to talk about it, rehash it, talk about it, even if it's something from 1944, right? But there's never sort of this collective voice to shout them down and say, you're not allowed to talk about that. And again, no shade at them, but I would say using that template against with us black men, if we want to talk about slavery, we want to talk about uh, black codes, segregation, prison industrial complex, right? School to prison pipeline, police violence. When we want to talk about these things, we run the risk of getting accused of scapegoating or coming up with excuses. So we will often tend to neglect the very real factors that's causing us problems and shaping our young men. As part of our solution and restorative process, we're expected to exclude a whole plethora of factors, and
True.
and that's not very realistic. I mean, part of diagnosing a problem, right? If you go to the doctor and you say, "Doc, uh, you know, I I'm coughing like I got this pain in my throat. I've been coughing," and they say, "Well, what's going on in your life?" And you say, "Well, these people keep blowing smoke in my face every day. I'm in a house that's full of people that smoke. They blow the smoke in my face. I don't got good food to eat. You know what I mean? They come and kick my ass once a week." And then is the doctor likely to say, "You know what? I understand that, but you know what? Let's not make excuses. Let's focus on what you can do for your health." And you say, "Okay, I'm with it." The doctor said, "Well, you might want to take this medicine and start taking this food." You like, cool. You go back home to the same situation. I guarantee you, when you go back to the doctor, you're going to have some of the same results. Why? Because you're leaving out a whole important piece of the diagnosis. It's not that you exclude the self help, it's that you have to be honest about the entire assessment so that you can correctly deal with it. So
Right.
that any responsible doctor in that case would say, yes, get fresh air, walk, change your diet, do something about that smoke. Because see, if you keep living in a house full of smoke, guess what? Your lungs, that you're gonna, no matter how much you do for yourself, you're still being exposed to the same reality, right? So part of the diagnosis is acknowledging everything.
Right. Right.
Uh, as black men, that's part of what we have to do, and we got to be free to do that.
Right.
We got to know we're free to do that. When we start talking about our realities, we can't let anybody shame us into saying, "Hey, we're tired of the excuses," right? If you, I know we did a podcast a while back that we talked about. I think I brought up an example of planting a plant in rotten soil.
Yeah, I remember that.
We're often told, "Hey, leave the past in the past," but hey, that's the soil. That's the soil. We got to deal with it. We got to face it. We got to see how did it contribute to our current situation, not so we can keep falling, but so that we can rise. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And I
Real
think
quick, one
that
other thing you said, brother. Okay, go ahead. I'll get
no,
to
go
what
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to say that. Oh, the other thing you said about, and I like that analogy about about different sorts of black men, military, prison minded, good, law abiding, the wise or the educated, or then you have the woke brother, the kumbaya brother. Okay, this, and I would suggest to you that these are not authentic, free black men. I would suggest these are roles that people find to play that allows them to survive. For example, we're in a hostile world, okay? We are in a hostile world that will see us dead or will see us arrested mentally, spiritually, financially, soulfully, any dimension of our being, they attempt to murder or to arrest, right? Some say it's intentional, the yays have it. Some say it's just a product of a machine, of a system, accident, right? Whatever. We're in a reality that tends to our destruction. Now, within the context of that reality, right, we can become a convict, right? We struggle and we survive. We're decadent. We're dysfunctional. Click. They put the cuffs on us. Now we're in and out of the system. We trying to survive, right? We're a convict, but yo, you got to be hard in that. You know what I mean? Survive, or you play by the rules. You be good. You be good, nigga. Hoping you don't get punished.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want no smoke, master. I'ma just go to school. I don't want no smoke, master. I'm gonna play by the rules you set forth. I ain't even gonna put that on education. I'll put that more on the kumbaya, brother.
Right, right.
I'm gonna do what you. I don't want no smoke. I'm not gonna be causing no problems. A survival mechanism. I'm gonna play by the rules. I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm gonna go the number of squares you tell me. Whether or not you're looking, I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna straight and narrow. Right? The good law abiding brother. Okay, survival mechanism. Even the wise and the woke brother. When you study these brothers on closer inspection, what you find out of all these categories are black men trying to find safe havens within a largely aggressive society and world so that the woke brother can be safely behind a keyboard and sort of preach down to other people and then just look at statues of Egypt all day
Mm-hmm.
and say, look, they did this, they got black skin, back in, Timbuktu, which, again, I'm not knocking being woke, I'm not knocking sort of anything.
Oh
I
yeah, definitely.
recognize these self-preservation spaces because we learn what happens to true revolutionaries. People that not are not only sort of quasi-informational revolutionaries, but actual revolutionaries. It's a hard way to go, man, and it's the warrior's role. And a warrior, often ends up, like our brother Malcolm and Martin and them. And I wanted to say, and just really to finish that, us as black men, being free to talk about the circumstances that confront us shamelessly, not as if we're looking for excuses, but as we are diagnosing properly so that we can find solutions. And once we start to find solutions, it doesn't mean the diagnosis stops. You maintain, you keep maintenance on things. We keep learning our past. We keep discovering how it applies to our present and our future. And those of us who are able to do this, it's not our concern that black men by and large are woke. It's not Kanan's responsibility. It's not Fayyad's responsibility to know that black men, by and large, are coming out of sort of these other safe spaces, these survival modes, and just getting by, and that they be on our team, right? What we do as men is we are men regardless of the environment because it's who we are on the inside. And as we show that on the outside, what do? We raise a standard. We raise a standard because we do it anyway. So eventually, right, other men's gonna see that, be like, yo, damn, yo, I never thought about it that way. Hey man, look, I'm a real man. I'm not intimidated, right? That Fire started this, or Kanan has started this, and they doing their thing. You know, here's what I got to contribute, right?
Right. Yeah.
And and then, so that grows. So even at the end of the day, if it's only 10 of us out of 10,000, it don't matter, man. That's the standard. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it is. I mean, like, we can't realistically lament over, everybody that sort of don't make it or is blind or decides to, take a consciousness vaccine,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
or just check out. We can't really be, that's not the end game, because that's a defeating before we even start, because we know everybody ain't gonna make it, man.
Right. And exactly. And I don't see no group that got everybody on board, even successful ones. So I'm like,
Or
it
even charged with that responsibility.
exactly. So, and I think that's a good way to put it. Those are definitely roles. Those are roles of different black men trying to find a safety net or safe haven where they can at least feel some sense of manhood or whatever it is they trying to accomplish, or even just safety. And you're absolutely right, because that's what it appears to be, where, like I said, I see all these different type black men, and I'm just like, I'll throw something out there, and just thinking that it's all good, and I get these reactions where I personally just feel like that don't correlate with what you're trying to present. Like, you're trying to present that you don't mind basically being man enough to say that what you say is valid in a lot of ways. Where if you tell somebody something about yourself as a black man, you don't have to feel like you got to water it down, because when you know that you are man enough or human enough or whatever to validate yourself, you don't necessarily look for answers, or you don't need other people to validate you. So you don't have to look for that, like kind of like a child looks for validation because they want to make sure they're doing something right. Like, you kind of take that away once you realize that as a man you validate yourself. So like you said, if the guy want to look at pictures of ancient Egypt all day and say that's where he from, he should never feel like he got to prove that.
Right.
If he feel like that's where he from and you ask him, hey man, where you from, he should be like, I'm Egyptian. And he should say it with a straight face and a confident body, where you feel like, oh, all right, because then you're gonna respect him as a man. But if he like, oh yeah, well, I read in the book that me and my people, we all come from, it's like, whoa, hold up, I'm asking you about you. I'm not asking you about all people or all men. I'm asking you where you from. And once you start validating yourself, because anybody else can do it. If an Asian dude right now said he was from somewhere else, as an Asian community, people are gonna respect him and say, hey, he a man. He said this is where he from. People are not gonna mock him and tease him for saying, oh, you don't know nothing because you lost your history, like it just fell out your pocket one day. It's like, no, first of all, we ain't lose our history. The history ain't necessarily lost as much as people want to say it is. It's just so much people haven't told us certain things, but we find them out. But like I say, what I'm really getting at is basically we have to start validating ourselves and being comfortable with that. And I think it will help us grow out of those roles to feel like we need other people to validate us in these so-called little groups, like I say, the kumbayas and the militaries and the different type of roles that black men seem to play. And one thing I wanted to touch on is because you kind of brought up like how the Jewish community can um, speak about their traumas and everything that's happened to them as a people freely.
No,
And it made me think of the Nick Cannon situation. I was watching
hey, bro, 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 bro.
yeah, go ahead.
piggyback real quick on something you just said?
Okay, go ahead.
So that because that's some fire you getting into. I say real quick disclaimer, or not a disclaimer, but just clarification. I'm not down in brothers who have found spaces, or they might have even found their callings in certain realms or certain areas, right? If
Mhm,
someone is played by the rules and they are practicing law, or they
mhm,
are writing comic books, or they are, or even if they're in a conscious, quote unquote, consciousness movement, and it's a man taking care of himself and his family, not a burden to, the community. Hey, everybody has a role to play.
right.
So I'm not really down, I'm not down in that per se. I'm saying for me, ultimately, when we decide what is the solution for us, we need to take leadership. And by that, I mean, we as Black men need to set the dominant culture for our world, so that when we get the doctors, the lawyers, the writers, the the woke people, all these people, that energy will be when beneath our dominant culture instead of feeding a dominant culture that's Eurocentric
Exactly.
at this point.
Exactly.
So
No,
like people finding safe havens within a Eurocentric thing and still paying their taxes and still sort of following mainstream concepts and this and that. We're still feeding that dominant energy, which is destructive to us. I think once we take dominant precedence over our world and society, right? People that are not sort of the leaders, that are not sort of the revolutionaries, cool. They'll have a role to play as long as they're loyal. And it's people that's not cut out like that. It's people that's not built like they gonna get out front and take no arrows. I mean, that's just the truth. So they
exactly.
find little places and they good at what they do. But
And
they
that's
might be waiting
necessary.
on they waiting on people like us to go ahead and bring a new purpose,
Yeah,
because that's ultimately what happens. The masses tend to follow the few, whether that few be, a few rich white folks, right, that don't have our best intentions,
mm,
or true truth. And one other thing I just wanted real quick, when you said, I want to say, oh yeah, no matter what people do, man, it's good. I just have to ask, does it have a practical role? Like, is it productive? So if I say I'm Egyptian, I would expect you, Kanan, to say, okay, you Egyptian? All right, what language is that? What is your history? What can you should be able to come to me and I can tell you about Egyptian history. What were the gods? What did the gods believe in? Did I practice as a part of my culture slavery? Or what did we do to bodies and or cats? Were cats gods? Or in what instances? And all these other things. If I'm going to claim something, then me as a man, I have to delve into that. I have to know, to the same extent I'm going to know who I am. I can't just say Egyptian because I like the pyramids. And because it's a tight cartoon out where they're flying through the air, or I know like it's aligned with the Orion belt or what have you. I can't just accept sort of the glory of something, the commercialization of something, and then not really know it if I'm going to claim it for myself. Otherwise, I'm perpetrating, right?
yeah,
So I
exactly.
would I respect what every man would say or would do. I ultimately can't pass sentencing on him. But if he come to me and say, "Yo, I'm Egyptian, I'm a Moor, Kemet, I'm actually native to the United States, I'm a Hebrew," no
Yeah,
matter what he comes to me and says, I'm gonna be like, "Hey, all right, let's study that. How much do we know? What can you tell me?" Right? Because truth is not intimidated by, closer inspection. Anyway,
exactly.
man, I just wanted to, before you
Oh,
got to the next.
that's definitely true. That's and I agree because even when some people say that they American even, and I'm like, they don't even know what they saying. Like it's so many different avenues, but like you said, as a man, you should know all of those things. If you say you anything, even if you say you black, you should be able to back that up. So you gonna tell me where the country of black is at? Point to it on the map, and then maybe I'll consider you saying that you are black. Otherwise, I will. So we can hold each other accountable by questioning and say, hey, we should be solid in what we say. But at the same time, it'll be like if you were traveling the world and you come across another man and his culture, you generally just respect his culture. You know, like if somebody introduce you or brings you into their house, or invites you into their house, you don't just necessarily come in and criticize and say, "Oh, this is art." Well, where you get that from and who painted it? You just kind of respect the man's environment, and I think that's something that you see generally amongst men who are actual men. A man don't have a problem respecting another man's beliefs. Like, you don't have to criticize them, because like you said, if you want to have that debate, we can have that debate, but just as casual conversation, we should be able to have casual conversation without feeling like we have to debate each other necessarily to that extent. So I think it is going to be like a balance of what you're saying and what I'm saying, basically, which will,
Facts,
will
facts.
will get us to a common ground where we just, all right, I respect you. Like, now we respect each other as men. We are going to be more comfortable coming around each other, because we're not necessarily trying to prove something to each other, like, oh, I got to come with my stuff together, because that's a good and a bad thing for us. It's good because it makes us step our game up when we in the presence of ourselves, and we know that we need to raise the bar high, because that's just how we do. Like, people can call it cocky. They don't have to understand us like we understand us. So we know the difference between a black man just saying, hey man, stay on top of your game so that you can be successful, versus a black man who's just trying to dish you or trying to mock you. We know the difference.
And
So
when
yeah.
you're secure within yourself, see, if I come around you, I don't have to feel intimidated or insulted, because I know where you're coming from. It's not a destructive place. Like, you don't have destructive energy toward me.
Right.
So, no matter, even when you say something that I may perceive as challenging, even if being some men that are not, some that males that are not men, when they're in the presence of another intelligent, confident, strong black man, sometimes they don't know how to deal with that, and it will come out as sort of lashing and haterism and all this stuff.
Yeah, I see
Why?
it all
Because
the
they
time.
don't have it within themselves. But when a real man comes in that presence, he's like, yo, okay, this is inspirational.
Right,
That's
exactly.
some of the things I've been thinking about. Wow, this brother think different. He got some answers. Let
Right.
me step my game up.
Exactly.
This is
That's
my
the
area over here. I'm gonna be over here. I'm gonna see what this brother think about this. I'm gonna build on that, right? And like, that's that's how it should be, and that's how every true man would be in his essence, even if he's not even educated. He'd be straight out of prison, no intellect, but he got wisdom. And
exactly.
that man can learn, he can grow, he can be wise, even though he's not been to any of their institutions of higher learning, quote unquote. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And yeah, so kind of like I was getting back to you brought up a point, and I was just gonna mention a Nick Cannon situation, because he did speak out about his truth or whatever, and he basically got labeled or titled anti-Jewish, like he was
Anti-Semitic, right?
anti-Semitic. Yeah. So I was watching like another little podcast on YouTube. A guy named Dr. Boyce Watkins. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
Oh,
he kind of was talking about the Nick Cannon situation, and they were kind of coming from an angle saying that the black male is getting. They were talking about buck breaking. You familiar with that term?
yep.
Yeah, so they was just saying how that's kind of still happening in society, where a black man with a certain level of celebrity status or financial status speak out against, or not even speak out against somebody, but speak their truth, and then they get labeled and they basically get brought down, right? And he was saying how he felt Nick Cannon shouldn't have apologized, and he was just going on about some things that he thought. He wasn't really dissing Nick Cannon, he was just kind of having a discussion about it. And it just made me start thinking about when those type of situations happen. I think that celebrities put themselves in such a bubble that when they do face the reality of like white supremacy or whatever they going up against, they put themselves in such a bubble against the common man, the everyday man, that they become more vulnerable than they think, and they'll speak out against these people, and then when those people take their money and they cash, they forced to apologize because they so caught up in their celebrity where they thought this was a good idea to act pro-black or be a part of the struggle until somebody take food out your mouth. And now because you're not, it's not really about the struggle, you apologize and you're more willing to be buck broken per se because you don't want to go back down with the common man, or you haven't networked with the common man to even build your support. So if you were to go against your oppressor, that you will have the support of the black community. And I think a lot of times we see that even with celebrities, is that people will say, "Oh, look what they did to Bill Cosby," or "Look what they did to R. Kelly." And I think a lot of times those celebrities don't realize how much damage they do to themselves by trying to speak on issues without really gaining the support of the common man. Like when you look at Malcolm X or Martin Luther King's, they weren't too good to sit down and talk with the common folk, basically. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have no kind of connection with the people on ground level, you're not gonna have any success at that higher level, which is why I feel like we don't see a lot of celebrities do a lot of pro-black things, is because I think they missed that component when it comes to black men really sticking together. Like you can't even be too high on your horse to say I'm gonna fight this fight by myself because I'm rich and powerful. Because the second you find out how not rich and powerful you are, you make us all quote unquote look bad because now you apologize and begging and pleading, but you was representing a strong black male 2 weeks ago. So a lot of this stuff just basically kind of ties in together, where I just feel like black men have this feeling where we know we want to speak out and we want to be more free about the things that we do, but there's still a disconnect with what we're really up against, because we can't really divide ourselves so much where we think we can fight these fights alone. Like it will have to be collective if we ever really want to have that sense of manhood or empowerment, where we don't have other people criticizing us, and it basically dismantling our movement, if that makes sense. So I was just kind of rambling, putting it all together to get it out. But basically, I want to see more of a collective effort between all levels of black men if we really want to gain that sense of manhood back, because I feel like it's really being lost with time. As time go on, you just see more and more disrespect for the black man in movies, where a black man will be getting beat up by a little white girl or something, and it's just like, come on, man. Like I know that's not necessarily true, but it does get, you get tired of seeing it, and to the point where you like, even the guy who's acting in the role needs to be more conscious of what he's doing. Now I know you got to eat, we all have to eat, but we have to be more conscious if we're serious about really becoming men in such a society.
Facts, man, facts. One thing you said was, so yeah, the thing I would say about this celebrity and Nick Cannon, Cosby, R. Kelly, yes, in the same sort of vein where, well, just real quick flashback and then flash forward. Flashback in history, one of the tactics of white supremacy was to say, let's study this black community, or with unity, community of people, and let's see, right? We noticed that the most intelligent, the most motivated, driven ones amongst them, if we leave them amongst them, will tend to be the rabble rousers. They will tend to be the ones that stir up discontent, a hankering for education and book learning. You know, these ones that are, when you see in a young black boy, when you put a book in front of him, if his eyes start to light up, if you see him sneaking from the corner of his eye, looking at them letters, you might want to whoop him,
Mm-hmm.
or you might want to let him on in the house. Let him in the house. Give him a book to read. Be nice to him. Give him some of the food. Ironically, reward him for wanting to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him how special he is. Tell him how different he is than the rest of the niggers. And when we raise him like that, actually what we can do is harness his talents. He might wind up inventing things that's going to make us money in the future. He might wind up inventing things that we can benefit off of. We can learn him, and then what also would happen? He will be raised up as a standard for the rest of the niggers to want to be like.
Mm-hmm.
They can see what Master did for him,
Right.
and you'll find the rest of the niggas trying to follow that same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Though there's not enough spaces for all the niggas to be that, they can all aspire to be that, and we can use the one, two, or few that we pluck from amongst them and use them, and the rest of the niggas will live vicariously. So the rest of the niggas will look at that one and say, look how we made it. And this sort of notion of plucking the best and the brightest from the black community, I don't mean that there are not bright people and that there's not talent in the community and everything. I mean that the moment it starts to become expressed, right, the establishment and the system can then reward those individuals, i.e., pulling them out. Right now, they're living in a different place. They're getting a salary. They're getting big money. But what's the condition of that? They plucking them from the community. Now, whether they're acting or singing or hosting shows and everything like this, they're doing that for mainstream. So it's still sort of the same ploy. And the thing is, you get black folks who otherwise would be talented, who could be really part of movements within our people when we had to live together. Now that we have the option of going mainstream, a lot of the talent gets recruited to mainstream, and what? They get dependent on mainstream. They get well fed. By the time they build a life, get a house, build a family, have a standard of living, and I imagine the white folks are so nice to them in those circles, especially when they're used to being abused and spat upon. Man, when they find themselves in a place where they're in the highest echelons of ecstasy with white folks, that's a real hard psychological reality to fall from. So you establish, and God forbid they got a couple wild parties or videos of them under their belt. Who knows?
Right. Right.
Nowadays, all they need is a few people to come forward with an accusation.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, he gave me a Benadryl and he groped the breast.
Yep.
10 years? Really?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that this is a cautious thing for the black man who would be successful. When you have your talents and you invest them in mainstream, yeah, there's a reward system, but it's a sticks and a carrot system. So you can get that bag, but if you got to know when you take that bag, when you sign a contract with the devil, once you step out of line or violate the fine print, guess what? That's your soul, bro. That's your ass.
Yeah.
Gonna hit you with a stick.
That's it.
And Nick Cannon, I think the whole buck breaking thing, hey, it's true. I don't know how much of a see Nick Cannon, you're right. He had a platform, and just the fact of him speaking that message was powerful. Not that he
Mm-hmm.
acted per se like if he was like that quintessential buck per se. He was intelligent, interviewed people, a lot of those things that were perceived as threatening. Even once he identified himself as a Hebrew, I would imagine that he did studies and he's got historical evidence and trails to back that up. Respect.
Right. Right.
But when he calculated that I'm gonna put that out here, see a warrior, when
Mhm.
warrior put it out there, he says, "This is it. This
Yep.
kamikaze right here. This is all or nothing."